An abridged version of the story The Lion and the Unicorn, written and illustrated by Shirley Hughes. Every evening, soon after dark, the warning sirens wailed. Then came the awful droning of enemy aircraft overhead, and firebombs and explosives whined and whistled out of the sky. Lenny Levi and his mum huddled together under the stairs. Lenny clutched the badge that his dad had given him before he went away. It was made of solid brass, a lion and a unicorn up on their hind legs fighting each other. Lenny kept it in his pocket always, where he could feel it. Dad was fighting too. He was in the army far away. Sometimes they got letters from him. Those were the best days, when Mum read out bits to Lenny over dinner. Dad always reminded him to be brave, just like his lion. One night, the bangs shook the house so badly they thought the roof would fall in. "We should have gone to a shelter," muttered Mum. The next morning, when they went out, the Robinsons' house wasn't there anymore. Their things were lying all over the street amongst the rubble and broken glass. Luckily, they'd gone to a shelter instead. Mum made a decision. Soon, suitcase packed and his name on a label pinned to his jacket, clutching his precious badge in his pocket, Lenny joined the crowd of other children at the railway station. Mum was there to see him off. "It'll be lovely in the country," Mum told him. "Flowers and rabbits and all that." But she was nearly crying. Lenny only realised what was really happening when he was in a crowded railway carriage. He put his head out of the window and shouted, "Don't leave me, Mum! You've come with me!" But the train had already started to move, very slowly at first, then fast gaining speed. "I'll come see you soon," called Mum. "Be brave!" It was so dark when at last Lenny arrived that he couldn't see where he was. The windows were all blacked out. Then he was led into a huge hall. There were no rabbits that Lenny could see, just some tired grown-ups, and two girls called Joyce and Patsy with a little one called Winnie. They were evacuees. Lenny was one too. The evacuees had to sleep in a big attic room with dark beams overhead. It was chilly and had no electric light or carpets. A curtain hung down the middle, with the girls on one side, but Lenny was alone on the other. He was frightened. The only thing that seemed to help was the brass badge that Dad had given him. He went to sleep clutching it. Lenny longed for Mum to come and visit, but she wrote to say that she couldn't until it had all settled down. She was working in a fireman's canteen. Mum's weekly letters stopped coming one day, though. Every morning, Lenny waited anxiously by the gates for the postman to arrive, but there was never anything for him. He told nobody how worried he was, but he'd started to have bad dreams about searching for Mum and running, and lions leaping out of him. He was frightened. He wanted to go home. One night, Lenny waited until the other evacuees were asleep and crept out of bed. He had his suitcase ready packed and put his precious badge in his pocket, creeping downstairs to the back kitchen. It was tricky to unbolt the back door without making a noise, but he managed it by standing on a chair. He was running away. He was going back to London. He planned not to go by the main drive in case he was seen. Instead, he thought he'd cut through the gardens, into the orchard, through a hole in the hedge and across the field. There was a bright moon, and Lenny's shadow tracked him nimbly across the silent paths. Suddenly, he thought he heard something moving stealthily and carefully through the grass on the other side. He listened. The whole night seemed to be breathing, purring, growling. He was sure something was coming through the hole in the hedge. What if it was a lion? Lenny didn't stop to find out what it was. He dropped his suitcase and ran. He ran wildly until he was heaving for breath. He saw a door that he knew led to a small walled garden. He pushed it open, fell inside, slammed it shut behind him. Lenny was crying now, but he felt safe. The garden was completely quiet. The rose bush was frozen in the moonlight, but underneath, in its dense shadow, something glowed softly. It moved gently. Lenny wasn't frightened. He went towards it, and at that moment, he saw a unicorn. It looked just like the one on his dad's badge. Lenny knelt down, laid his head between its hooves with his face on the grass. He was very tired. Almost at once, he fell asleep. When he woke up the next morning, the sun was hot on his neck, and the unicorn had gone. Lenny got up and looked around. He knew that something had changed inside him. It seemed now that it was only his own night fears which had been chasing him, not a real lion. The lion and the unicorn were back inside Lenny's head and on his badge, but one important thing was real, and that's what the unicorn stood for, a different kind of bravery. Keeping going and trying your best, even if you're scared or worried. Lenny was walking back to the house determinedly, and as he came round the bend, he saw a figure coming towards the house. A small person in a brown coat, a familiar walk. There was a good distance between them, but Lenny quickened his pace. He broke into a run. Now as he got closer, the outline of the person was blurred in tears. Lenny raced the last few yards. "Mum, oh Mum," he shouted, and threw himself into her arms. "Didn't you get my letter?" said Mum after a while. "Bombed out. A direct hit. The whole house is gone. Luckily I was working at the canteen that night." "Oh Mum, I was scared," Lenny said, looking down at his feet. "I was going to run away and come back to London. But I'm brave now, Mum. I'm still scared, but I know I can try. I can try for you." "Oh, you are a brave boy, Lenny," said his mum, giving him a hug. "A proper hero. But you don't have to worry about staying here anymore. We're going to your Auntie Rachel's in Wales. It's by the sea, Lenny. And guess what? Your dad's coming home on leave." Lenny felt in his pocket to check his badge was safe. So he, Lenny Levi, was brave after all. He knew that it didn't mean he'd never be scared again, but at that moment he could face anything.